Father cyber harassment hidden twin. I caught him red-handed and my world shattered. Do you know what it feels like? I told my therapist that morning at 8 a.m. to wake up drenched in sweat because someone you love has turned your phone into a. Started keeping a log on March 3, 2018 at 2:15 a.m. dates times URLs because when your life looks like a crime scene you try to map it. Writing 3/3/2018 to 15 anonymous email subject we see you felt like carving the chaos into something with edges. The red flags multiplied. On April 12, 2018 at 9:00 p.m. an Instagram account surfaced using a photo from our anniversary me with the expensive bottle of wine spreading lies about my marriage. On May 21, 2018 at 11:03 a.m. my bank called about another $28.47 charge at a travel site. I sat on the kitchen floor of 1428 Maple Street, hands trembling, the wet dog smell from next door seeping through the window, and realized someone was cataloging my life. Dad, someone is impersonating me online, I told Henry in June. His voice was sugar slick. You're imagining it, Carol, don't let the internet make a story out of nothing. His minimization landed like a fist. That laugh he used, a casual, superior, triggered the kind of internal tightening that presaged panic attacks. When the kids were little I worried about scraped knees. Years later, I worried about pings at 3:17 a.m. doctored photos, anonymous threats, messages that courted private jokes. I tried to work through it. In August 2018 I had an anxiety attack so severe I was taken to urgent care at 1:44 p.m. My pulse hit 140, I could not breathe. After that week off, returning to spreadsheets was impossible. My mind fogged, the anxiety attacks became so frequent I couldn't work full days. Emma's reactions were a study in cognitive dissonance. At 23, she oscillated between concern and self-preservation. I love you, Carol, she'd say, then text, can't a night shift. Once, September 2, 2018 at 6:30 p.m, she borrowed my grandmother's silver necklace for a club night. She returned it without a word about a DM I'd shown her, one that included a photo Henry had sent of Emma wearing the necklace, captioned, nice family jewels. Her silence made me hot with betrayal. The town turned cruel. Teachers whispered during pickup at 3:10 p.m, PTA parents crossed to the other side of the street. At the December 2018 holiday party someone I thought a friend sidestepped me as if I were contagious. Rumors accelerated faster than I could debunk them. In January 2019 I received a DM that read, everyone knows what you did. The details were intimate, too intimate for strangers. I reported it. Officer Morales, badge #314, sent me down on February 14, 2019 at 2:00 p.m. and said, without provider records, digital forensics is tough. He was polite, he was unmoved. I left the station at 14:32 Oak Avenue with a police report number and a chill that felt like abandonment. Later, neighbors mentioned quietly that she made a scene. Silence from authority invited the town's gossip. My nightmares multiplied. I woke at 3:03 a.m. seeing Henry at the foot of my bed, the necklace in his hand, my children's faces blank. I would bolt upright, lungs heaving, taste of copper in my mouth. Panic attacks arrived without warning, hands numb, world narrowing to the sound of my heartbeat. Trust issues crept into everything. I double-checked locks at 11:11 p.m, changed passwords at 7:30 a.m. before therapy, and washed for any sign of betrayal. Physical evidence surfaced in petty, brutal ways. My phone's camera roll held screenshots of conversations I had never sent, timestamps, read times I was at work. I took the files to Lewis at 22 Cedar Lane. He printed logs at 11:12 a.m, brows furrowed. This is targeted, he said. Not random. I felt both vindicated and exposed. Every attempt to rebuild new cards after that $28.47 charge, new emails felt futile. New fake accounts sprung up within days. Former friends began to cross the street when they saw me. One woman even told a mutual friend she didn't have the emotional energy for my problems. Public shame became a daily weather pattern. I started locking the house at 9:00 p.m, checking corners with a flashlight on my phone, imagining Henry's voice in every silence. My thinking had been rewired. Where I had once assumed goodwill, I now scanned for threat. Each red flag tightened the net. I kept writing dates in my log, reading them like a litany. March 3, April 12, May 21, September 2, February 14. They were not random. They were a pattern pointing at someone I loved. And the worst part wasn't that he was doing it. It was how everyone else let him get away with it. I documented everything. Each entry felt like a map out of hell and survival. Pawn. My chest was still tight as I spoke. The panic from my 3 a.m. nightmare hadn't faded. Henry's voice in my head, threatening me online, even though he lived less than 4 miles away. My father. My controller. My tormentor. This was never supposed to be my life. I was 41 years old, sitting in a beige therapy room that smelled faintly of wet dog because of the therapist's golden retriever who wandered in sometimes, and I was recounting the kind of story you'd expect to read on a true crime forum. How did it start? With trust. With wine. With the belief that family means safety. Henry wasn't just my father. For the first 20 years of my life, he was my hero. He taught me how to ride a bike, how to cook scrambled eggs, how to measure success by discipline. When I turned 18, he bought me a small silver necklace, my grandmother's heirloom. I wore it every day, thinking it was a symbol of love. Only later did I realize it was a leash. The first red flag was subtle. On my 10th wedding anniversary, I splurged on a $64 bottle of wine, expensive for me back then. My husband and I sat on the porch, sipping slowly, when Henry called. Celebrating without me, he asked, voice dripping with mockery. Must be nice. How much did that cost? $64. You'll regret wasting money. I laughed nervously, but my stomach churned. He knew the exact price. Later, I found out he had been reading my emails, my bank notifications specifically. I brushed it off as over-involvement, not realizing it was surveillance. When the kids were little, my daughter was 4, my son barely walking, Henry became helpful grandpa. He babysat, picked them up from preschool, even paid off part of our mortgage once. Everyone said I was lucky. A father who shows up like that, rare. What they didn't see was the control hidden in the favors. Every dollar he spent became a debt, every act of kindness a tool for leverage. The cyber harassment began years later, around 2016. At first, I thought my credit card company had made a mistake when they called about $28.47 in charges at a luxury clothing site. Then another call came, this time about a subscription to an online surveillance service, my name, my email, my address. I cancelled the card. New charges appeared. Emma, my younger sister, was 23 then. She was the golden child, the one Henry never criticized. Carol, she said once, rolling her eyes, you're paranoid. Dad wouldn't do that. Maybe you're just stressed. She had no idea how deep his manipulation went. Or maybe she did, and chose denial. It was safer to stay on his good side. Therapy was supposed to be my refuge. I started going every Thursday at 7:30 a.m. I poured out my fear, the anonymous death threats sent to my work email, the fake Facebook accounts posting humiliating stories about me, the late night phone calls with silence on the other end. I told my therapist about the nightmares, Henry pounding on my door, Henry laughing while my phone buzzed with notifications, Henry behind every shadow. You need boundaries, my therapist said. Block the accounts, change your passwords. I tried. But the threats kept coming, always signed with some twisted inside joke only Henry would know. When I confronted him, he laughed. You think I waste my time on the internet? Maybe you should stop imagining enemies, Carol. That's when the anxiety attacks began. Early mornings, like 5:17 a.m., I'd jolt awake gasping for air, heart racing as if I'd run a marathon. I couldn't focus at work. Former friends started whispering after anonymous emails accused me of stealing money from PTA funds. One neighbor literally crossed the street when she saw me coming, avoiding eye contact. I still clutched my grandmother's necklace at night, pressing it so hard into my palm it left an imprint. A reminder of love. Or was it a chain? The first undeniable proof came when I checked my voicemail one February morning. The voice on the message used a voice distorter, but at the end, clear as day, it whispered, silver necklace, porch wine, midnight. My secrets. My father's fingerprints. That was the moment my stomach dropped, my skin went cold, and I realized Henry wasn't just controlling me. He was destroying me piece by piece, click by click. And the worst part? Nobody believed me. On March 11, 2019 at 6:05 a.m. I woke with my heart punching my ribs from a dream so loud my throat hurt. The room smelled faintly of wet dog again, therapy office ghosts clinging to me, and I checked my phone because the nightmares had taught me to expect an inbox of cruelty. Instead, there was a single email from an address I didn't recognize, subject line of family records. I opened it with trembling hands at 6:13 a.m. and for the first time the map I'd been drawing became a portrait. Attached was a scanned birth certificate, my name, my mother's name, and beside it another name I had never been told. Caroline Mee Thompson, a twin, Catherine Mee Thompson, born 11/3/1984, Hospital, St. Luke's, Room 6. My stomach folded. I had been born at 2:47 p.m. on November 3, 1984, but Henry had always said the pregnancy was complicated, that one baby didn't make it. We were told the other didn't survive, he'd said on November 4, 2004, voice hollow and final. My grandmother's silver necklace had been put on me the first night I went home, he told me, part of a funeral rite. Lies stacked into a coffin. I called my mother at 6:22 a.m. Her voice was papery. You shouldn't be digging, she whispered. You weren't meant to know. My throat closed so hard I tasted metal. Why would you keep a twin from me? I asked. She didn't answer. She hung up at 6:26 a.m. The document trail in the email led to a private folder on a cloud server. There were photos of hospital wristbands, shipping receipts for a UPS package addressed to 1428 Maple Street on 11/6/1984, and most poisonous of all emails between my therapist, Dr. Lang, and someone using a Henry-only handle. The timestamps were brutal: April 2, 2018, 9:14 p.m., May 5, 2018, 7:02 am. Dr. Lang writing, she's unstable, I'll tell you if she mentions X. The sick realization spread through me like smoke, my sanctuary had been a listening post. I felt physical nausea and acid heat in my face. I gripped the phone so hard my knuckles whitened. How could you? I mouthed to nobody, to the air that had once smelled like my daughter's shampoo and the expensive wine from our anniversary, $64 spilled across the porch and now used as fuel for humiliation. My internal monologue went merciless. Of course he knew. Of course he paid someone. Of course the necklace was a bargaining chip. I printed everything at 8:12 a.m. at Lewis's little shop on 22 Cedar Lane. This is big, he said, breath visible in the cold, holding out the Dr. Lang emails. The printout trembled in my hands like a living thing. I drove to the police station 1432 Oak Avenue at 9:05 a.m., evidence in a folder creased with my fingerprints, and handed it to Officer Morales. He read face blank. This is serious, he said at 9:22 a.m. Then he did something I will never forget. He slid a business card across the desk with a private number and said, for your safety, keep this between us, things get ugly. His eyes flicked away. A call I never took later that day, 12:44 p.m. was from that private number. You should stop, the voice warned. For your own good. I blocked it, then called Morales back. He answered at 12:58 p.m. and said, we'll handle it. But when I later subpoenaed call logs with a lawyer because by June I had a lawyer Morales' number and the private number had a single comment thread, a deposit made to his account on May 3, 2019 labeled gift $2,000. Not enough to buy shame perhaps, but enough to buy silence when reputation is currency. He had been bribed. The betrayal multiplied. Em stopped returning my calls after I showed her the emails from Dr. Lang on March 12, 2019 at 10:03 p.m. I can't be part of tearing the family apart, she wrote at 10:19 p.m. The words were punctuated like a period to our relationship. Neighbors who used to wave now whispered that I never knew our family secrets. A colleague at work forwarded a screenshot of an anonymous post that read, "She makes things up for attention," with a photo of the expensive wine bottle from our porch and the exact $64 tag highlighted. My reputation was being edited out of the truth. Psychologically, I felt amputated. My thought patterns had been rewired into a surveillance state. Every knock, every email, every reflection in a window set off alarms. Nightmares bled into wakefulness. I slept at odd hours, 2:0 a.m., 5:17 a.m., waking with my mouth dry and the metallic taste of panic. The anxiety attacks became so frequent I couldn't work. I called in sick on March 13, 2019 at 8:37 a.m. and cried until the watch read 10 p.m. Trust wasn't just broken, it had been siphoned off and laundered into quiet collusion. But there was a peripheral map to the conspiracy. The cloud folder contained correspondence with other named accounts, a traced email domains registered to a small digital freelance shop in town, and to an anonymous posted group that had been attacking other women in our community for years. A pattern emerged: women who crossed Henry, women who'd inherited money, women who'd made him uncomfortable. The abuse was wider than my house, it was an economy. I remember the sensation of my hand closing around the printouts like they were a lifeline. I wasn't just a victim of a controlling father anymore, I was at the center of an organized campaign of identity theft, gaslighting, and bribery that had used my therapist and my town's complacency as instruments. The shock reverberated through my bones. If this could happen to me, born in our small town, wearing my grandmother's necklace, what had it cost Catherine? What had they bought with her silence? That question settled like a stone. It pushed me forward toward the one cruel, necessary truth: the therapy sessions had been inevitable. It was June 14, 2019, 7:02 p.m., the air thick with humidity that carried the faint wet dog smell from the neighbor's yard into mine. I had set up my phone on a tripod, facing the living room where Henry liked to work on his laptop. The plan was simple: capture-proof. Months of emails, threats, bribes, and stolen passwords led to this single moment. Emma was out, supposedly at a friend's. I told her to stay away. I couldn't risk her being caught in the crossfire. My hand shook as I poured a glass of wine, the expensive $64 anniversary bottle I'd saved for its special night. I sipped it to steady my nerves, tasting oak cherry in betrayal. At 7:15 p.m., Henry walked in, humming like nothing was wrong. "Carol," he said, eyes sharp. "You left your laptop open again?" My voice broke, faltering. I had rehearsed lines for weeks, but they evaporated in the heat of reality. "I think you need to explain the emails, Dad, the threats, the fake accounts, everything." His face went blank, then a slow, thin smile curled his lips. "Threats, sir?" He laughed, low and controlled, the same laugh that had haunted my dreams. "I have no idea what you're talking about. Maybe your imagination is running wild." I held up the phone tripod like a shield. "Don't lie, I have it all recorded. I know about Dr. Lang, the bribes, the cloud folders, the $2847 charges. I know about Catherine." Henry's smile faltered. "Catherine, what nonsense are you spinning now? You lied about her death, you lied about her existence, you hid her from me." My chest heaved, the panic and fury collided. "And you used everything, my friends, my neighbors, my sister, to gaslight me, control me, humiliate me." His reaction was swift. He lunged for the laptop, knocking over the tripod. I screamed. The wine spilled across the hardwood, warm liquid prilling over my toes and the shiny reflection of my grandmother's silver necklace catching the last light of sunset. In that instant, I realized the stakes. He wasn't just defensive, he was panicking because he knew I had the proof. My jaw dropped when I noticed the angle of the phone still capturing him, shaking, reaching. Neighbors Miss S. Dalton from 1436 and Mr. Reed from 1424 were peeking over their porches. One yelled, "Call the cops." I dialed 911 at 7:22 p.m. Henry froze, realizing the damage was permanent. "Carol, you can't," he barked, voice a mix of anger and fear. "I already have," I said, tears streaming. "And it's over, all of it." The police arrived within 10 minutes. Henry tried to compose himself, brushing wine off his hands, but the footage from my phone played on my screen in real time. Morales, badge #314, yes, the same officer arrived, and his eyes widened slightly when he saw the evidence on my phone. I later learned he'd quietly changed sides. The bribe had been exposed during a subpoena. Neighbors watched silently as officers spoke to Henry, his voice rising, screaming over mine. "You've ruined everything," he shouted at me. I had to bite my tongue, hands trembling, remembering the therapy sessions where every word had been catalogued. I didn't want to feed him more control. When the officers escorted him to the squad car at 7:48 p.m., the air felt electric. The wet dog smell lingered, mingling with the sharp metallic tang of panic and the spilled wine. I sank onto the sofa, feeling the first genuine relief in years. Emma arrived a few minutes later, breathless. I can't believe this," she whispered. She held my hand, and I realized the weight of betrayal wasn't mine alone to carry anymore. Later, as the adrenaline faded, the full picture sank in. My father's control, the cyber harassment, the manipulation of Dr. Lang, the bribery, the public shaming, it had all been orchestrated. And yet, despite the devastation, there was clarity. My life had been stolen, but the theft had a trail. I had caught it, documented it, and now finally exposed it. That night, I lay awake, staring at the silver necklace glinting in the moonlight. I realized that the accidents he engineered, the whispers, the fake threats, they had been planned from the very start. Every nightmare I had endured, every panic attack, every shunned friendship had been meticulously orchestrated. The magnitude of it made my stomach turn, but it also lit a fire in me, a determination to reclaim every fragment of life he tried to steal. By the time the neighbors went back inside, the first inkling of relief settled in my chest. The confrontation was over, the climax had shattered the control he held over my world. I had caught him red-handed. I had witnesses. And for the first time in decades, I felt the tremor of power in my own hands. The battle wasn't over, but for the first time, I knew I could win. The real work, the healing, the rebuilding was about to begin. The days after Henry's arrest were quieter than I expected, and that quiet felt like sandpaper on raw skin. The chaos had stopped, but the consequences of years of abuse rippled outward. I remember sitting on the couch on June 15, 2019, at 6:42 a.m., the sun slanting through the blinds and casting lines over the spilled wine stain that I hadn't yet cleaned. The wet dog smell lingered faintly from the neighbor's yard, an invisible reminder that normal life smelled different now. I couldn't sleep. My body had been rewired for panic. At 3:17 a.m., I woke again from a nightmare of Henry grinning as my grandmother's silver necklace slipped off my neck. My hands trembled as I pressed it against my chest like a talisman that no longer worked. Anxiety attacks came with startling frequency, often triggered by the smallest noises, the click of my own phone, a neighbor's door closing, Emma laughing too loud in the next room. I had to call out sick from work for the third time in a row on June 17, 2019, and my boss, who once respected me, now whispered with a colleague about her instability. Even friends I thought were loyal began crossing the street. I ran into Melissa at 2:13 p.m. on June 19, 2019, at the grocery store. She saw me and turned abruptly down another aisle. A lump formed in my throat. Former coworkers whispered at lunchroom tables, spreading rumors faster than any social media attack had. Public shame had become a second skin. I could feel it woven into every glance, every sideways smile, every call to hello I received. Therapy sessions had to change. Dr. Lang was exposed, and I needed a safe place. By June 21, I found a new therapist, Dr. Sweeney, a woman whose office smelled faintly of peppermint and parchment, and whose eyes did not flick to a phone mid-session. We started at 7:15 a.m., early enough to catch the quiet before the day's judgments. I disclosed everything: the cyber harassment, the bribed officer, the stolen identity, and the hidden twin. Each word felt like a shard in my chest. Medication was necessary. My anxiety had become physically debilitating. I started on a low dose SRI at 8:32 a.m. on June 23 and attended weekly cognitive behavioral therapy sessions. Each appointment left me exhausted, but slowly I began identifying patterns in my thinking that Henry had instilled. My trust issues were intense, so severe that when Emma texted me at 10:14 p.m. one night, I froze, expecting manipulation. But slowly, I learned to separate fear from reality. The social isolation was brutal. Former friends blocked my number, muted me online, and whispered about my breakdown. I remember walking past the playground on July 3, 2019, where parents I had known for decades avoided eye contact as if my existence was contagious. I thought about the $28.47 in phantom charges and realized he had drained more than money. He had siphoned my sense of belonging, my reputation, my confidence. Even Emma's relationship with me shifted. She tried, but the betrayal ran deep. I couldn't blame her for stepping away. Fear makes people choose safety over loyalty. And yet, being alone in that fractured social world amplified the panic attacks. My dreams were filled with shadows, Henry whispering secrets about Catherine, neighbors murmuring, Dr. Lang smiling behind me. Financially, recovery was daunting. My credit cards, strained and compromised, had left me in debt. Every payment I made reminded me of his reach. I slept on the edge of panic, counting bounces, tracking every charge, double-checking passwords, fearing another breach. By August 2019, I began writing a journal at 6:47 a.m. every day, documenting every thought, every panic, every moment of betrayal. I wrote about the phone calls, the stolen identity, the hidden twin, the whispers, the social isolation. Each entry was cathartic and terrifying. I allowed myself to cry openly, sometimes for hours, because I realized grief wasn't just about losing him, it was about reclaiming my own life. I was at rock bottom physically, mentally, socially, and financially. But there was one ember that refused to die, the knowledge that I had caught him red-handed. That realization, small as it was, became the first step out of the rubble. The footage, the documents, and the email trail were mine. They were proof. They were leverage. And most importantly, they were evidence that I had survived. I would lie awake at night, staring at the necklace, tasting the metallic tang of fear, and whispering to myself, I will rebuild. I will survive. I will not be defined by his control. It felt impossible, some days unbearable, like trying to lift an ocean with bare hands. But slowly, in the quiet of 5:17 a.m. mornings and the muted light of therapy offices, I started to feel the first flickers of hope piercing the darkness. By September 2019, I realized recovery wouldn't be passive. I had been living in reaction for so long, responding to threats, panic attacks, manipulated friends, bribes, and whispers that the idea of proactively reclaiming life felt alien. I started with small, concrete steps. Every morning at 6:15 a.m., I would do a grounding exercise in my living room, hold my grandmother's silver necklace, breathe deeply, and remind myself that my body and mind were mine. That necklace, once a leash, became a symbol of survival. Therapy with Dr. Sweeney intensified. Cognitive behavioral therapy sessions at 7:30 a.m. 5 days a week were brutal. I confronted intrusive thoughts, dissected nightmares, and slowly rewired my thinking. By November 2019, I could sit in public spaces without immediate panic, a remarkable shift from 5:17 a.m. wake-ups triggered by shadows and whispers. I learned to recognize triggers, phone notifications, wet dog smells, even the faint trace of wine, once reminders of trauma, now signals to employ coping mechanisms. Financial stability followed. I meticulously resolved the $28.47 credit card debt, consolidated accounts, and installed monitoring software to prevent new breaches. Watching my balance rise little by little felt like reclaiming control, one number at a time. I even revisited the bank branch at 1421 Maple Street where my accounts had been exploited, demanding and receiving confirmation that all irregular charges were reversed. Each receipt I held was more than a transaction, it was a victory over fear. In March 2020, I took a bold step: travel. I wanted distance, both literal and psychological, from the life Henry had corrupted. I booked a flight to Italy, landing in Florence on March 12, 2020. Walking through the Piazza del Duomo, tasting fresh olive oil and rustic bread, I felt my breath slow, my mind uncluttered for the first time in decades. The art, the architecture, the smell of espresso, it reminded me of the world beyond paranoia, beyond whispered accusations. I journaled daily, capturing moments of all clarity and slowly self-love. Emma joined me in Venice 2 months later. Our reunion was cautious. At 7:45 a.m. one morning on the Grand Canal, she handed me the necklace she had hidden for years. I wasn't brave enough before, she said, tears in her eyes. I see now you survived more than I realized. I clasped it around my neck, letting the silver glint in sunlight, and for the first time felt our bond intact, not perfect, but real. Rebuilding relationships required honesty. I contacted former friends and colleagues with documentation of the harassment and betrayal, choosing vulnerability over fear. Some refused to listen, some apologized profusely. I learned the hard truth: social trust would take years to repair, but even the partial restoration was empowering. I documented the journey in my journal at 6:42 a.m. each day, tracking growth, triggers overcome, and the re-establishment of boundaries. By August 2020, I returned to work part-time, easing into full responsibilities by November. Panic attacks had lessened in frequency, nightmares became less vivid, and I no longer flinched at shadows. When I did wake in sweat at 3 a.m., I could ground myself with techniques learned in therapy, whispering, "You're safe. You are here. You are real." The necklace often rested in my palm, a tactile reminder of resilience. Travel continued to be a cornerstone of my recovery. I explored Japan, Thailand, and New Zealand over the next 2 years, each journey a reclamation of autonomy. I met people who didn't know my past, who didn't gossip, who didn't judge. The taste of street food in Osaka, the smell of wet earth after monsoon rains in Bangkok, the quiet beaches of New Zealand, each experience rewired my body to associate joy with life rather than fear. Ultimately, I discovered an inner strength I never knew I possessed. I became my own advocate, my own protector, and, crucially, my own storyteller. I documented my journey with brutal honesty, the threats, the betrayal, the panic, and the long climb to recovery. Today, sitting at a small cafe in Lisbon on September 24, 2025, sipping coffee that tastes like freedom and smelling the faint salt of the Atlantic, I feel grounded. My grandmother's silver necklace glints on my collarbone. I have rebuilt my life, reshaped my identity, and reclaimed my story. I am no longer Carol the controlled, the surveilled, the publicly shamed. I am Carol the survivor, the traveler, the empowered. The world is vast, terrifying, beautiful, and mine to navigate. And I know, with every fiber of my being, that I will never allow someone else to dictate my reality again.